You're right. Translation is really about making sense, and it's part and parcel of life. But why do we want to get an MA, and specifically why an MA in translation and interpreting? And today I'd like to give you some things to to think about, right? Some directions in which to explore this. First of all, we are all, I think, most of us here, city dwellers, tough New Yorkers, right? And of course, Hunter at the heart of it. This is our subway station that we're very familiar with, that leads you to the college, and we are in the hub of things. That goes without saying. Manhattan being one of the most vibrant cities and most diverse cities in the world. The rough and tumble of life, right? Most of us are drawn to languages, right, and drawn to the interlanguaging, right, and the interconnectivity, that languages are at the center of, and that languages facilitate, right, because we are, the sort of, we like the, dealing with differences, right. COVID-19, and that is a given now. COVID-19 has forced a reckoning with an altered reality for a lot of us. And we find that, right, the old conception of you graduate and you take a job, and you kind of stick with it, the benefits and all, and basically it has to do with location, where you're comfortable, where you're already based. At the same time as we're kind of forced out of that comfort zone, right, of location, livelihood, community, all kind of fitting in as one, right? COVID-19 has also opened up all sorts of possibilities, as you know, right? A lot of the businesses, industries across the board, right, have been forced to kind of think of multimodalities. How do you deliver things, differently? Yes, the local is still as important, right? But at the same time, the local and the global, are coming to play. So, we reckon with the world as one, right? And yet, of course, something like that, like a pandemic has taught us more than ever, right, that the world is also very differentiated, right? And it is and rather than but, right? Because it is one specifically because it's so differentiated, right? We're drawn together and we're interdependent. And the future of humanity in that sense is really about connectivity. Okay, and connectivity is something that cannot happen, right, without languages, right? As I use the term languaging a lot, right? Sort of it is in this business, right? It is about the dynamism of language rather than learning a language to possess it, as like a thing, like, oh, I've added, a badge, like I speak Arabic, I speak Spanish, I speak Chinese. And rather than that, right, we are actually seeing how these languages, can add to the vitality of our connectivity in the world. So sure you can see everything. Translation is at the center of it all, and this, of course, is obvious, right? Once it's put this way, it is in that sense, right? The world is now, we are in a special moment for translation. Right, you see, look at this picture here, right? We all recognize this as, Southern New Yorkers, right? It is all about, the bull, right? And the bull has always been the symbol of the vibrance of our the vibrancy of our economy, right? How tough we are, right? And the great American dream is all there. And yet, of course, when something like that hits us, right? Even the bull, is masked up, right? And so that is translation actually at work right here. It's being translated, into a different mold, for us to see a different aspect of how the world is gripped by the pandemic. And this is I think this was taken in the early phase of the pandemic in spring of 2020. So, from self to community, that's what translation actually allows you to, to do, which is kind of take yourself and your language, or you're struggling with learning Chinese, learning Spanish, learning Russian, take that, right? What are you going to do? How are you going to make a difference, right, with other people in society and in community? So it is really about bilinguals come out, right? Making sense, brokering, mediating, closing the gap, right? Asking new questions. And indeed, right, all of that, the center of translation is really about pushing the boundaries, right? It's when we push boundaries that you effect change, right? And so, some of you are probably familiar with this picture, right? You see how young people get together. These are translation moments, right? And you see, the everyday grind of a parent conference in New York City, right? How that cannot happen without translation, right? So all of these things, are things that actually, if you're inspired by these things, right? If these are the things that, energize you, that's what this field is, is for, right? And and I think you're for it, and the field is for you. So what brings you to this field, right? You see, it's about differences, like I said, right? Languages, right? We started with languages, we like the challenge of learning languages, but at the end of the day, it's about place. We happen to be in New York City. We happen to be, your parents probably send you to, to study a second language because of place, because of connection, because of your heritage, because, you live in Flushing, because, you're in the middle of Jamaica, and those things matter. We dig place and our rootedness and identification place, adventure. And we see the interconnectivity, we see the parallelism, we go for hot pot and we know that, hey, it's kind of a little bit like fondue, kind of a little bit, it's about melding and intermingling, right? So where Hunter will take you, right? I mean, those are the things that we come with, of our history and our upbringing. But Hunter Mate, this program, right, take you to, specific industry purposes, right, that would draw on your language skills, right? So say, for example, right, in new media, subtitling and dubbing, there's a lot of that that's going on, right? The multimodality of, when you look at, when you stream Netflix, and, so you take for granted, right, all the languaging that's going on. And it is happening, and people, are needed to do these things, right? And then the multicultural events, the international festivals, the trade shows, all of those things that are going on. I don't know if you even know this, on the West Side Highway, right? Near the West Side Highway, you have the Javits Center, all of those things going on. Again, it takes people coordinating, right? Savvy, cosmopolitan New Yorkers like you guys with multilingual skills, specific and technical training as well. And again, Matty is what, can take you to that, to those scenes where you're the ones driving all the things that are happening. And then, of course, right, in sourcing and project management, there are, as we speak, right, there are, I think that my last research, and it's 26 language service companies with offices all over the world, but whose main office, right, is actually in New York City. So then what that means, right, is the sort of managerial, techno-managerial positions out there waiting to be filled by people who are informed of the language service industries as well as technically trained, right? And in a bit, I'll be more specific about what exactly, right, are the the technologies that you'll be learning. So here we go, right? So what it is that translation is one piece, an important piece in what is called now the new knowledge industry, right? Why do we call it new knowledge? Because the new knowledge industry involves, okay, as you know, AI, it involves artificial intelligence. And at the heart of it is translation memory, is organization of that. At the heart of it is indeed, right, computer-assisted translation, what we call CAT tools, right? Adaptive neural machine translation technologies that are, being researched. And, project management, new platforms that are coming up, right? New platforms that actually cater to multilingual users, right? And, you have terminology management, you have, content enrichment, all of these things, right? At the heart of it is the linguist. Okay, and it is a real misconception, right? I'm sure you hear it a lot. Oh, now with Google Translate and machine translation, we don't need a human translator anymore, right? And actually, the opposite is true, right? Because huge volumes, of content being produced day to day. Verizon localizes. We call it localization, right? Verizon is actually a world business, although we think of it as a New York, telephone company, right? And the localization that involves, I would think the last time I heard it was 56 languages being localized, right, for the services of Verizon. And you can imagine the kind of driving, the kind of, I would say, management, that is needed, technical management, right, updating, that is needed. And all that, again, falls on the human linguist, okay? So you start with translingual skills. In this program, definitely, you're honing your translingual skills. Like, notice I'm using translingual, right, as opposed to the more familiar bilingual. And once again, why, right? Because we see languages as moving elements, all right? Transitioning, transforming themselves, okay? In translation, languages affect one another, right? It's not about, oh, you go from point A to point B and you never come back to point A, right? So bilingual, on the other hand, right, sees languages as a part, and that's why in some ways, right, we live in a hegemony, of English, right, being such is so essentialized that a lot of us have been cheated of our bilingual heritage, right? Because we're taught to kind of erase that, right? To move from one language to another and forget that one. And that's really sad, right? So here is a field that valorizes your translingual skills, right? And your bilingual history, And so that is the thing that is so powerful about it, right? So, you as you do this, right, what it is that translators, develop the kind of cognitive dexterity that actually, is a privilege, right? And is a powerful asset, that monolingual everyday practitioners, who are stuck with one language may not be privileged to, okay? So that's another thing that's important. High context thinking, right? Translators are very high context, right? A high context means a great deal of specificity, right? So but specificity that is not taken out of context, right? Abstracted, but rather, to see all the elements, and how they they hold together, right? Those of you enjoy writing, and that, and it requires that kind of high context for coherence, right? Digital workflow, indeed, right? You would be learning all of the workflow that is, that is out here just on this chart alone, right? How all of these things work. And so, listen, we're not kidding, right? It is a real industry. Although, like I said, because we're living in an essentially monolingual culture that is America, is little known, outside of this. But in fact, this is a huge industry, right? And what it is that, you see, this is a little bit outdated as a prediction. You see 46 billion, right, predicted. Actually, the current prediction of 2022 is that the industry is predicted to be at $52 billion. So Mati prepares you for a career, right, in professional interlanguaging, professional translation, right? And you want to square yourself with yourself. Where are you now, and where will you be in 3 or 5 years from now, right? Some of you are graduating within a year or two. Some of you may be graduating a few weeks from now. Okay. Scenario one, you may be in New York, in Philly, wherever home is, right? Somewhere close by. Scenario two, you may be in Singapore, in Nigeria, in Germany, in Vancouver. That's how the world is now. When you think about it, right? You wouldn't know, right? But do you know for sure what you'll be doing, right? Maybe not. You could plan about these locations, right? But you may be actually open to what you want to do, right? Based on maybe where you end up, perhaps your spouse moves there, right? You get married and you need to be, in a particular place where your spouse has a job, right? Will you need your languages? That's the one thing you know for sure. You will need your languages, right? In this understanding, you strategically leverage bilingual, bicultural skill sets. That's what you want, right? Now you commit to hone your skills and systematically learn the field that is translation and interpreting. If you're going to have a graduate degree, why not this one, right? Because you know what? Most of the graduate degrees, right, that you get, it is actually going through the sort of academic acumen that is required and research skills, right? And independence of time management and presentation, all of those things, right, that you would want to hone, that is signaled by you having a graduate degree. But in terms of the specific learning of content, right, ultimately, you want to be in a field where you can be flexible as to what your actual work position or industry is about. And the secret about translation and interpreting is that it's the field of fields. You can be in any industry sector with a degree in translation and interpreting. So you receive your degree credential that qualifies you as a professional translator and interpreter, and you can position yourself at the same time for a broad spectrum of jobs that require languaging. So content matter in the context of the language service industry. What happened around the turn of the 21st century? I'm just going to go through this so that it sinks in for you, right? Well, of course, right, since the World Wide Web, globalization is a given, right? It's a cliche now, right? What is not globalized? It's hard to, think of things, right? Most things in the urban world, where there would be jobs, where you would be building a career, are actually globalized, right? And it is in that sense a multilingual, bilingual world order. And with 2008, right, there was a financial crisis. You're very young then. You may not know that, but sort of the old institutions, right, the lending institutions, the IMF, okay, pretty much all of that got really messed up, right? The world had to learn some lessons. There were a lot of breakdowns of local markets, and global markets have to adjust themselves. And with that, right, you have with 2011 or so, okay, there's the emergence of new alternative work models, right? These work models have come about because, of course, again, you were still pretty young. There was on top of the internet revolution, there was the fiber optic, the mobile revolution, right? That actually turns consumption, right? Patterns and rates of consumption, all that, into the hands of people with phones, and that has actually redefined how industries deliver their goods and services, right? And that's why you have e-commerce. That's why, we take so for granted, right, what Amazon is doing. And, and it's kind of, a lot of it is pretty awful. We know that. But at the same time, you can't deny it's dominant. And it's, it's a lot of jobs, again, a lot of back-end jobs, not just the front-end jobs, right? I mean, think about it, right? How we can't live without Google, right? Again, what about the back-end jobs? Who's doing that, right? So in the last decade, right, what you see is urbanization, right? A work model where you have ways of delivering things, that is actually based on the platform economy. Okay, meaning you go on a platform, order these things, but again, right, the servicing of these platforms, right, is where you come in. So you have, that's why, a great deal of investment in research in neural machine translation and, and new terminology, kind of like localization. What does that mean, right? What does that mean, right? With companies like Starbucks, Home Depot, Walmart, the market penetration that they do in the day-to-day, okay, outside of America, where people really don't buy anything big unless it's in their own language, okay? So that's why. So thus, bilingual, translingual skills become front and center. The 21st century global market, it has to be sustained, right? There's growing demand for language talents or specialists in 3 streams. In freelance consulting, okay, there's 1 stream, and don't look down on this, right? You can actually, set up, people have made a lot of money doing this work, okay? So translators and interpreters working in myriad sectors, right, and settings. At the same time, they could be also freelance consulting. In-house, of course, right? In-house translation and interpreting, and language management, project management, managers at all levels, executive, managerial, PR directors, and multilingual media management. Content creation, okay, and so that part, a lot of students, that are artistically and creatively inclined, you can think about, how Disney is surviving these days, right? How Hollywood has to have translation, even for people, right, receiving the Oscars right here in New York City, or in LA. Language service procurers, people that are buying these things, that are spending money because they themselves are fundamentally monolingual, right? And those people, you have to create, content for them. You can be content strategists, right? You can be searching, right, authentic content, right, and determining, things that are worthy of translation, and creatives, and also you could be all of that, and at the same time dwelling in A and B. You see, and so the A, B, and C, right, are not exclusive of each other, right? In fact, a lot of people are making up careers that are based on a combination, different position, market positioning. So Hunter-Matty, right? So we hone your hard and soft skills. Soft skills in that you got to learn how to identify, what the market sectors now, what is in trend. Those are the things, those are about, learning about the marketplace, right? Learning about brands, paying attention to why TikTok is so popular suddenly, right? And being tech attuned, right? Hard skills, right? Not being afraid of cat tools, not being afraid of terminology, data management basis. And you get training in both translation and interpreting, right? Depending on your, your skills and your intonation, some of you may want to focus on translation or your interpreting, right? So purpose-focused services, right? We expose you to those. You delve into a broad spectrum of industry sectors, right? New knowledge, including integrating literary and transcreative new media type of translation, from K-pop to to Airbus mergers, like acquisition contracts, right? Or patent litigation, or those form of things as well, right? So basically, oops, there should be a bit more here because it was cut off. Sorry. So basically, right, what it is that we are a professional studies program. We are not an academically oriented program, right? So I can kind of, cut to the chase about that. This program is, is not so much about translation studies, it's about professional translation interpreting. Okay. Internship opportunities in translation interpreting, right? At various levels of it, locally, you can work in the mayor's office, you can explore opportunities, with the housing authority. Those are, New York City ones, right? But this program is also accessible online, right? So, you may not be looking at these local agencies, right? You may be looking at, the sorts of, like I said, platform services, that organize international conferences, right, and events. Conference interpreting, how do you coordinate those, consecutive interpreting, how do you package event translation and publishing, of multilingual materials, right? And then of course, there are other sorts of opportunities, other sectors, that involve a lot of global transactions, and these are some of them. Like for example, right, when you think about, like I say, patent registration nowadays, in our globalized economy, there are all kinds of things that need to be translated, from, I don't know, from Polish to English. There's a lot of coding, a lot of new software innovation that goes on in Eastern Europe, in fact, right, that needs to be translated, especially if they want these things to be patented for the English speaking economy. So real estate transactions, of course, there are all sorts of international investment in real estate, IPO filing, e-commerce, media sector, like I said before, right? So then, there is community interpreting, right? Very grounded, very real. For those of you who like this sort of work, there's no shortage of that right here in New York City and in many cities, in all over North America. So applying to Hunter, what sorts of students are we looking for? We're looking for on-track advanced proficiency in English, plus Chinese, Russian, or Spanish, or some other languages, the top 10 languages that are used in the internet. Okay, on the internet. So ability or willingness to develop baseline understanding and skills in the oral interpreting, that's all we ask for. Okay, if your inclination is more for written translation, right, because this is a degree in both translation and interpreting, so we need the kind of baseline, at least exposure and development. So other languages on a case-by-case basis, we accept, for example, Arabic, French, Italian, Portuguese, Korean. These are the most commonly inquired ones that I put in. I guess with German as well as one of them. A statement of purpose, you've got to demonstrate the above in introducing yourself on your statement of purpose, and also demonstrate some sensibilities as what do you dig about your language repertoire, right? How do you experience that? How do you identify these languages, right? So we want to see the kind of dynamic engagement in your formulation of where you're at in terms of which is your language A and which is your language B. And by the way, that's not in most cases it should be a complex question, right? Not a simple question. College transcripts, right? Undergraduate grounding, preferably in humanities, liberal arts, and social sciences, but not necessarily. I mean, if you're a science person and you want to do this, by all means, I'm happy to review your application. And also, we want to see involved multicultural identity and heritage, right? And again, that doesn't mean that if you study a foreign language to an advanced degree, that cuts you out. No, I mean involved engagement, right? With real practitioners, of these languages. Evidence of community civil engagement, some work experience is always a plus because we are a professional program. And success in Hunter, right? In the Hunter-Matty program, what it is. And that is ultimately, upon your acceptance into the program, as we groom you in this short period of 2 years or so, of course, if you go part-time a bit longer, we want you to be inducted, into the professional, into a professional community of practice, okay? And that means, right, that for us here, we're saying that translation interpreting is about change and movement. It's not about just getting a right answer or getting it out as soon as possible so you can, shoot an invoice, get paid, right? It's about professionalism as in, pride, it's lifelong learning, and that you're constantly checking yourself and improving, right? And you're actually personally accountable. And those are the things that we hope, right, to inculcate in you as a student so that your job is something that you're proud of, and that you get something out of, and that you're not, work is play then, and the grind of the work, right? It becomes something that empowers you and that valorizes you. So here's the curriculum very quickly. You see, we have basically, right, you have core required courses. There are 3 of them, and then you have core translation with language component. These ones, different language tracks come together, but your assignments, some of your assignments will be graded and set by language specific assisting faculty, right? So that's how it is. So you see here is you take a minimum of 2, or you can take all 3, right? And this one, for the required courses, you take all 3, and these are the 3 courses that you take. Okay, and then here, for the core translation and language component courses, there are 3, and you could take all 3 if if the courses are available to you, and you want to take them, but you need to fulfill at least 2 of these 3. And then you have the electives, right? So for Chinese, these are the established courses. Chinese is our established track, and therefore, actually, we have a couple more that probably is not put in here yet. In any case, say if you come into this program, you're accepted into this program, and you are and your language pair is Korean and English, you could actually take some of these courses then with a faculty assisting in Korean, right, or in Japanese, right? Here's Russian, and in Spanish, again, right, Spanish, for students who are specializing in Italian and Portuguese, you could also take courses in the same classroom with these established tracks on the Spanish. And then in addition, right, the program is also flexible in that for students who are more technologically oriented, right, or if you're a student in a language pair that is a bit rarer, and we find that you have a lot of promise, and you convince me that you can really do this and thrive in this program, then we have some industry courses that you can make up the electives, right? So if you take localization and terminology and new media translation, there'll be 2, right? Then you can also take, you can devise your independent study course, right? And you can also take an internship in translation interpreting for credit. Let me put this back to give you a moment to take this in, right? So in summary, this is what it's made of, right? You have 9 credits of the core, and then the 2 core translation practice makes 6 credits. Of course, like I said, you can shift around here. And basically, of course, as Hunter students, you get a discount if you're studying full-time. Some students go over the limit, but 30 credits is what's required to complete the degree. And on a full-time basis, you can complete the degree in as short a time as 3 semesters. Okay, yeah. And then, of course, depending on the summer, right? Often, if you catch summer courses as well, you may complete it within a year. All right. So faculty, we have faculty as practicing professional translators and interpreters. So it is in many ways what you're coming into is a community of practice already. You'll be exposed to the connections, to the experience, right? Often internships, are gotten through faculty recommendations, and we have active partnerships with city government agencies, and possibly there'll be connections with language service providers as well. Industry networking through US-based professional organizations, and these are some of the largest ones, right? This NAJIT is for interpreting, judiciary interpreting, New York Circle of Translators, and then this is the Nationwide American Translators Association. These are associations that I'm personally active in, and this is the Canadian Ontario one, which also has a great deal of promise for us. Potential interaction and exchange with universities abroad. This is also something that have been asked of this program. Certainly, we are building broad relationships with professional training schools, and particularly actually in China, we're thinking about actually providing a program, a remote program with Sichuan University. And in turn, I think some of our students could spend time in Sichuan as well, if this goes through. So that's a good thing to be looking forward to. And J-term and summer intensives, and competitions, various things like that are the things we're exploring. So very quickly, because in case you're wondering or your parents are wondering if you're going to come in, what good jobs are you going to get? So these are the basic job titles that are like the standard in the industry, okay, for translation and interpreting, right? But like I said, what is unique about this field is that we're not limited to the straight and narrow that, oh, you're translator interpreter, you only look for jobs that says seeking translator interpreter, or seeking one of these in a language service provider company, right? Because on the side, a lot of translators as professionals do craft their own freelance positioning as well, right? So that way of becoming your own boss, especially in the US. And again, here, of course, you can take on these titles. You can be a personal coach, for example, if you happen to also have some other skill, like, if you have a great deal of knowledge in nutrition, in therapy, physical therapy, any of these things, you can be those, and you create a niche market, for language specialization. Or people who are interested in performance arts, you could specialize as a multilingual talk host, an MC. And by the way, you make a lot of money doing these things. You can work at weddings, right? I know that because I've done it. right? These things happen in the weekends, so it's sort of an additional opportunity. Copy editor, of course, ghost writer, script writer. Nowadays, all kinds of, like bilingual, multimodal type of publications, publication projects that need that. Of course, filmmaker, cultural consultant, and that's very broad, right? Linguist or an expert, that's so over here, right? So, if your parents are kind of conservative, is no, you better just join the military, because you want a straight job, then what can we do in the corporate track, right? I mean, this is for real, right? And this is how you would want to reason, okay, with yourself as well, right? So all master's degrees, pretty much now, it's kind of like a baseline if you want to be in any kind of a white collar position that is not, that it gives you some measure of responsibility and some challenge to the work so that it's not so boring, right? So a master's degree is really pretty much your baseline, broad knowledge base that, it signals that you are comfortable with high register communication, that you know how to write a paragraph, independently, that you are not afraid of dealing with a document that is 30 pages, to read and to summarize at a meeting, okay? Multimedia handling, that you know how to go from image to text, you know how to, research on YouTube and, and report back, on a project. So, regardless of the fields, right, those are the basics, analytical and organizational skills, right, that too. Any master's degree in translation and interpreting, right, would come with this one thing that is special. All the above plus an official credential, right, and skill-focused training on translation or interpreting or both. Okay, so that's what is different about, this degree compared to, say, a master's degree in business, business management, which is kind of broad, right? Or a master's degree in real estate. Again, you study real estate in English, and you learn all about real estate, and you kind of limited to real estate. Yeah. So the Hunter master's degree in translation and interpreting. So what is it that we have that makes us stand out? Well, strategic positioning for real jobs in all sectors. That's something I emphasize from day one. In fact, from now, at this point, even before you apply to this program. Right, so the above plus credentials and skills focused on translation and interpreting, plus strategic positioning for real jobs in all sectors, which include editorial and journalism, diplomacy and foreign relations, real estate and construction, premium client banking, right? There's a lot of money involved. Like I said, people don't deal with, big ticket items without actually dealing with it and reading documents in their own language, right? Corporate PR marketing, there's a lot of that being done internationally, fashion and luxury merchandising, the list goes on, really, right? So you get the point, right? It is pretty much in any field. Cyber border security, of course, you can, still work for the State Department. And in fact, you're very much sought after in the State Department. They're constantly looking for critical language experts, okay? Research and advocacy, a lot is needed there, what with our problems with climate change, our problems with, with world peace, not to go too far there. Global education initiatives, right? As you know, study abroad is increasingly becoming, something that, that is more of a given than, than something special. And a lot is needed in terms of brokering, in terms of interlanguaging. So that's it. I will end here. And I hope you will ask questions of me and reach out to me, right? I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you very much.